guys, this is the sewing tutorial of the 8 pieces blouse, and this is how mine turned out. So in this tutorial we're going to be sewing this 8 pieces blouse. So first let's look at the materials, and these are the materials we're going to be using for this tutorial. Here I have my Ankara print fabric. You can use any fabric of choice. Here I have what they call tailor's hem. This is actually self-made by me, not perfect but manageable. We use it to iron out the curves. Then here I have my S-Day, which is also called lightweight fusible interfacing. I'm not going to be using it for this tutorial, but you can iron this to your Ankara fabric to make it stable. Then here we have wording for padding. Here I have my crinoline or crinoline. Then here I have a zipper. And here I already have my patterns already drafted in the previous tutorial. So now let's get started. My table wasn't wide enough, so please, I hope it permits me to cut this on the floor. So first I spread out my lining on the floor. Then I place my fabric directly on the lining with the right side facing me. I am not going to be cutting on fold since we already did that on the pattern. Now I am placing the pattern pieces on the fabric. After placing the pattern pieces on the fabric, I'm going to add allowance since no allowance was added on the pattern before. After adding your desired allowance, you can then go ahead to cut. I added 1 inch zipper allowance to the center front, 0.5 inch around the armhole and the curves. And at the hem, I used 0.5 inches allowance for the hem. 1.5 inches to the sides. What I want to do is draw a cup for the wording. This is my bust point line. And I'm going to mark my bust radius, which is my nipple to under bust, from this line. And this is my under bust line, like you can see. Then for my bust point line, I'm marking my bust radius. Then from the side, I come in 1.5 inches from this side. Okay, I mark 1.5 inches from the side, and I'm just going to blend the points together till I get to my under bust. Do the same thing for the other side. Mark out your under bust line. Then from your bust point line, which is your shoulder to nipple measurement, mark your bust radius upwards. So you just mark your bust radius upwards. Then just draw a curve like a radius till you get to your under bust line. So now this is what we have for the cups. Notch the under bust. Do the same for the 4 pieces. Make sure to notch your under bust for the 4 pieces. Also make sure to notch the waistline for all 8 pieces, both front and back. So here I'm just notching my waistline. Go ahead to cut out the cup from your pattern. You can either trace the cup on a new pattern paper, but for me I just cut out the cup from my pattern, and this is what we have. Here I have my wording. Place your wording on fold. So here I'm placing my wording on fold. You will need 4 pieces, that is 2 pieces each of each cup. Make sure to add 0.5 inch allowance to the center front when cutting. So here I have my 4 pieces. We are going to place the wording on our fabric now. So what you have to do is make sure it lays on your under bust. Remember, we notched the under bust, so make sure it lays on your under bust. Then you can pin. You do this thing for the other side. Make sure that it lays on the under bust. Just make sure that the end lays on the under bust. Then you can go ahead and iron this flat. I have ironed the wording on all 4 pieces, and this is what we have. Now I'm going to arrange them in place. With the right side facing the right side, join the side front to the center front, making sure that the notch at the underbust meet. So here I'm just making sure that the notch at the underbust meets, and I'm using a pin to hold it down. So you do the same for the other side. Make sure that the notch at the underbust meets, making sure the right side is facing the right side. Now use 0.5 inches allowance that was added to sew round. After sewing both sides, this is what we have. Notch the underbust. Make sure to notch the underbust. Place on tailor's ham and iron the press seams open. So here I'm placing this on my tailor's ham and I'm ironing the seams open like so. So after ironing, this is what we have. Look at how smooth it is. So now we're going to work on the back pattern, and you're going to notch all the notch points you made on your pattern. And the reason for this notch point is to help us join the sides together. So this is just like a guide when joining the sides together. So we're just notching all the points. So after notching the points, you can go ahead and remove the pattern paper. So now join the right side of the side back to the right side of the center back, making sure that the notches meet. So making sure that the right side of the side back faces the right side of the center back. I'm going to make sure that the notches I made, they meet by pinning it in place, right side facing right side. Then I'll use my 0.5 inch allowance that was added to sew. After sewing, this is what we have. So this is how it looks. It's going well. Place right side of center back and sew the allowance that was added. So I'm placing right side facing right side of my center back, and I'm going to sew using 0.5 inches allowance. So after joining, this is what we have, and I've already gone ahead to press the seams opened. When I'm done, I'm going to sew the same thing for my lining. So I did the same thing for my lining. I also went ahead to press the seams open. So most cases when sewing star lines, most times the armhole gets smaller. So a hack I do to avoid this is to increase the armhole depth by 1 inch. So what I like to do is come down from my armhole by 1 inch. This is just to avoid the armhole from becoming tight when I fix a sleeve. So this is a trick I do. I don't know how other people do theirs, but this is what I do anytime I notice my armhole becomes smaller. So I just blend it all the way to that 1 inch I made downwards, like so. Just blending it. So I'll just do this for both sides. So after blending, I can go ahead and cut that parts that we no longer need using my scissors for both sides. Make sure to increase the armhole depth for the lining pieces too. So don't forget to do this for the lining pieces. What I'm doing now here is making sure that the back and front armhole are equal, and if it's not equal, I'm going to remove the excess parts. So for the back, place right side of lining on the right side of the main fabric. So here I'm placing the right side facing the right side of the lining and the main fabric, and I'm going to pin them down. Place the crinoline on top. So I'll just place the crinoline on top like this. Then I'll also pin it down to hold it in place. Then I'll get my hemming gum, and I'm going to sew my hemming gum right on top using 0.5 inches allowance. So now after doing that, we are going to After doing that, we're going to stop stitch it, and you just make sure that the seam inside is towards the lining part and not the main fabric. So after doing that, I'll just take this to my machine and stop stitch, making sure that the rough seam inside is not facing the main fabric but lying directly on top of the lining. So always confirm. So after stop stitching, this is what we have. Just look at it, it's already giving that effect that I put a crinoline on it. So with the right side still facing the right side, make sure to sew 0.5 inches allowance of the sides. So now for the front, we're just going to place the lining right side facing right side of the main fabric, just like we did for the back. So you must also make sure that the seams meet. So here I'm just making sure that the seams of my lining and the seams of my main fabric, they meet, and I will pin it down. So what I'll now do is place my crinoline directly on top, and also place my hemming gum directly on top of the crinoline, just like I did for the front, and sew with 0.5 inches allowance. So I'm going to mark 1 inch from my zipper side because I do not want the crinoline to be on my zipper part, and then I'll sew my crinoline round, avoiding that 1 inch mark. So also make sure to sew the sides using 0.25 inches allowance. Also make sure to sew the zipper part using 0.25 inches allowance. So this is how the front looks. So now you can go ahead and sew or fix your zipper. So after fixing my zipper, this is what we have. So now I'm going to place my back bodice on top, right side facing right side, and I'm just going to pin this down, and I'm also going to just sew the sides using the allowance I added. I also attached a sleeve, and I used gathers for my sleeves. So now for the collar, we're going to be measure around the neckline. So I'll just take my tape and I'll measure around the neckline. So the measurement we get is what we're going to be using to draft our collar. So now you have to fold your fabric in 4. First fold it into 2, then fold it again into 2, making it folded into 4 places. So now roll a vertical line, making sure to leave a space at the bottom underneath for your allowance. Now from the folded end, mark your round neckline divided by 2. Now from that point, mark about 4 inches upwards to create a box or square. It should be able to accommodate the width of your collar. Now find the midpoint of the line and mark. Now go up 1 inch from that end and mark. So you're coming up by 1 inch. Then now connect to the midpoint. Now for my collar height, I use 1.5 inches, so I'll be marking 1.5 inches till I get to the end there. Now from the end here, you're going to come in by 1 inch just to give it that curve. So you can either use 1 inch, 1.5 inch, depends on how curvy you want it to be. Feel free to experiment. Now you're just going to blend this, forming the curve. Now I'm going to add my allowance of 0.5 inches round this collar. So now I can now go ahead and cut, and this will give me 2 pieces. This part with the curve is the upper part. So I went ahead to iron S-stay lightweight fusible interfacing to both pieces. I will place the lining piece on top, right side facing right side, and sew the upper part using 0.5 inches. Make sure to notch, very important. This is what we have after notching. So now I'm going to take the collar with the right side of my neckline facing the right side of the collar and sew round using 0.5 inches. So I'm just pinning it from one end to the other end, right side facing right side, and I'm going to be sewing round. So this is a very lazy method of fixing a collar. It's easiest, and after doing this I plan on using an overlock to finish the rough ends, but I won't advise doing this for a client. So after fixing the collar, this is what we have. Just look at how our 8 pieces blouse is looking so beautiful. Like you can see, you can also see the rough seams that needs to be overlocked. So the zip, and this is how our 8 pieces blouse looked. Guys, I really enjoyed making this top, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this tutorial. See you next time. Bye.